Greetings and live long and prosper. It's me, Chaplain Danish House. I'm the Fleet Chaplain of Starfleet Command. Greetings to everyone in Starfleet Command. I'm here with a message for you, hopefully a message of encouragement for you tonight. I'm recording this on Saturday, February 19th in the evening, just before supper. And I've just had the opportunity to see Star Trek Discovery's latest episode, Rubicon, season 4, episode 9, Star Trek Discovery, Rubicon. And there'll be mild spoilers for the episode, not really anything that's going to give important things away in this message. But watching the episode gave me the opportunity to reflect on the question of peacemaking. Peacemaking. Now, not to give too much away, but in the episode, there's a conflict between Captain Michael Burnham and Cleveland Booker. Cleveland Booker is her her lover. She loves him, and he loves her, but they're on two different sides of a major issue that's dividing them. And again, I don't want to give too much away, but Booker is going with a fellow named Tarka to try to take direct action to resolve a problem that the galaxy is facing. And Michael Burnham wants to use diplomacy and to try to initiate first contact, whereas Booker and Tarka want to take direct action. And it's a great episode. There's a great episode of sort of showing approaches to making peace. And so I want to talk about making peace because I think it's a very important and a very practical thing for each of us in our daily lives. As I always say, I'm coming at this from the perspective of a Christian pastor. I don't know what your particular religious background is, but I believe the principles that I'm going to be talking about are applicable across faiths and for people of no faith at all. There's a difference between making peace and keeping peace. Captain Pike in the Star Trek 2009 movie described Starfleet as a peacekeeping armada. And peacekeeping is vital and important, but it is not what I'm talking about today. Peacekeeping is sort of going out there and in some ways using force or persuasion to try to keep conflicts from flaring up. Peacemaking is different. Peacemaking is when you are trying to establish, to take a conflict that's ongoing or a difference that's ongoing and to bring it down a notch, to bring it down to the point where you can actually have good discussion with one another and be fruitful. The truth is that not all disagreement is conflict. Disagreement can actually be very productive. I think it's one of the reasons why I believe God created us as diverse people with diverse outlooks on life. Each of us has different experiences. We come from different cultures, and we have different beliefs. And when we come together, even in our disagreements, we're able to actually reveal different edges to arguments and have discussions that will help us to get to a place together we could never have gotten on our own. If we've got a shared commitment to the common relationship, if we've got common goals, then disagreement can be really fruitful, even if sometimes it can be heated. So we disagree on things. And that's in this episode, Rubicon, that's the situation that Michael Booker and Cleveland Booker and Captain Burnham are in. They have common goals and a common relationship, but they have very different perspectives on how to achieve the goal that they both want. And so they're in a situation where they can use peacemaking techniques to try to help resolve their conflict. Now, in the background, Tarka does not share common goals and does not share a common relationship. And so things are different with him, and I don't even know how it's going to turn out. Looking forward to the next episode. But when tempers flare, when people who are in relationship have tempers that flare, whether it's in a marriage or a dating relationship, whether it's between friends, whether it's in a Star Trek fan club, the Bible has very strong advice for making peace. That makes sense because the Bible is, in essence, one big story of peacemaking. In the beginning of the Bible, there's a conflict between God and humanity, where humanity spits in God's eye, basically. And the whole rest of the Bible is about God attempting to make peace with humanity. If you've never read it that way, read it again. I think it's a great way to read the Bible. So if the Bible is one big story of peacemaking, how does the Bible talk about the process of making peace? Well, the first thing that's really critical about making peace comes out of the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 5. It's a very famous parable that Jesus told to his disciples, and he's talking about what do you do when you are in conflict. What do you do when you see, and in that instance, what do you do when you see your brother doing something wrong, your brother or your sister? And in Matthew chapter 7, verse 5, the first principle is first get the log out of your own eye. I think we're all very tempted to meddle in other people's situations and try to fix other people before we are interested in taking stock of where we're at ourselves. If you're in a conflict, if you're in a disagreement with someone, the first step has to be the step of humility if you really want peace to take place. The step of humility says, what am I doing that's contributing to this conflict? Maybe I'm being oversensitive. Maybe I'm letting prior disagreements influence this current disagreement and my emotions about this current disagreement. Um, Maybe I need to check out how my words and my actions have contributed to perpetuating the conflict or escalating the conflict. Get the log out of your own eye before you try to take the speck out of your brother's eye, is what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, verse 5. Now, it can be really tempting to apply this to the other person. Oh, yeah, so and so needs to take the log out of their eye. Well, okay, you're looking at the speck. If that's the situation, you're looking at the speck. You need to look at your own eye. And humility, the step of humility is to take a step back and say, what am I doing that's contributing to this conflict? How have I contributed to escalating in this situation? Um, Getting log out of your own eye, that's the first step of peacemaking. The second step is to admit your part. Okay, I've taken stock. I've looked at where I contribute. Now I'm going to admit it to the other person. First, the book of First John, chapter 1, verse 7, has this really fascinating little verse. It says, if we walk in the light as God is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and God forgives us for our sins. If we walk in the light, we have fellowship with one another. It's not what I expect to read there. What I expect is if we walk in the light, we have fellowship with God, right? If we admit our wrongs, which is what walking in the light means, we admit our wrongs, well, it means that we have fellowship with God. But it turns out, and it does say that eventually, that God forgives us for our sins. But it turns out that the first result of transparency, of walking in the light, of admitting our wrongs, is that we have fellowship with one another. You know, in a conflict, it is often the case that we start to feel self-righteous. And even once we've started to admit our wrongs to ourselves, it's not until we admit our wrongs to one another that really the self-righteousness starts to cool, and we start to be able to look at the common values and the common goals that we share. We get the log out of our own eye. We take the step of humility. We take the second step of humility, which is admitting to one another the ways in which we have contributed to the conflict. Now, it's a scary thing to do this, and I understand that. It's scary because what if I admit my part in the conflict and they don't? Then I'm going to look like a jerk. They are just as much at fault in this as I am. Okay, take a step back. You don't have the ability to patrol their side of the street, right? You have to keep your side of the street clean. That's where your responsibility begins and ends, is on your side of the street. So yeah, admit your part and let the chips fall where they may. Get the log out of your own eye, admit your part. And the third one is see if it's an offense. See if the offense that the other person has committed against you is something you can overlook. The book of Proverbs, chapter 19, verse 11 says that good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. Good sense makes one slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook an offense. It is a glorious thing to just let the other person off the hook completely. Just say to them, Or say in your own mind, all right, look, yeah, they did something wrong against me, but I can let it go. I can let it go. There are offenses that we don't need to actually store up. There are offenses that we don't need to keep track of. We can just let go. Now, not all offenses are that way. Sometimes the harms that other people do are real and significant, and you can't just let it go. So, how do you do that? What do you do in a situation like that? You can't actually let it go. Well, I want to talk. Let me back up and say I want to talk a little bit more about letting go, and then we'll get to that. Um, get the log out of your own eye. Admit you're a part. Overlook offenses. And the fourth bit here about how you overlook offenses is to prioritize peace over your own rights. Prioritize peace over your own rights. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 7 says, it says to have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. You're in an argument now with somebody. If you're in the argument, you're already lost. Why not rather suffer wrong? Why not rather, the Apostle Paul says, be defrauded? What? I don't like that. Someone is infringing on my rights. They've done something wrong to me. I need to get, they need to be stopped from, they can't be allowed to just get away with it. Well, why not? Don't you kind of hope that they'll treat you that way? Aren't there situations where it's better to get ripped off and to maintain the relationship than to have to actually continue arguing until everyone admits that you're right? We have this sense that we have to be right in every situation, and we have to defend ourselves. Part of the Christian message, and maybe you're not a Christian, but part of the Christian message is that we don't have to defend ourselves. God defends us ultimately. We can let things go. And part of the Christian message is that when we try to defend ourselves, we sort of puff ourselves up in self-righteousness, and we wind up overlooking our own offenses rather than overlooking other people's offenses. So if it's possible to overlook offenses, do it. But there are times when you're not able to overlook offenses. What do you do then? Well, the Christian message here is even harder, actually. 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4 through 7, talks about love and says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It's not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. The relationship that we're looking for is a relationship of love, mutual respect, mutual uplifting. And we sometimes need to forgive the wrongs that others commit against us. Forgiveness is one of those things that people are very mistaken about. We think that we forgive people when they finally have paid their due, right? I can't forgive them until they make it right. No, you forgive them first before they make it right. Forgiving is acknowledging that the other person has committed an offense against you that they can't actually pay back at this point, and letting them off the hook for it, saying, I'm not going to pursue retribution against you. Forgiveness is a key virtue. And it's a key virtue not because it lets them off the hook, but because it lets you off the hook. Unforgiveness eats away at your soul. Unforgiveness makes you bitter. Unforgiveness shatters relationships, and it does nothing good for you. You get to retain your sense of self-righteousness if you are unforgiving, but it doesn't actually accomplish a good thing for you. So, and because that self-righteousness is actually detrimental to you. So you got to let it go. You got to be patient, got to be kind. We got to keep no records of wrongs, not be irritable or resentful. We need to forgive. You never forgive. This is a little key concept about forgiveness. You never forgive someone who deserves it, because nobody deserves forgiveness. You can only forgive something that's been done wrong to you. So forgive one another. Get the log out of your own eye. Admit your part in the conflict. Overlook the offenses that you can by prioritizing peace over your own rights. Forgive the wrongs that other people do to you. and then do what actually Star Trek Discovery's episode Rubicon illustrates very well with Dr. Culber. Dr. Culber steps into this situation with Michael Burnham and Booker, and he encourages them to look for common ground, to find common ground. What are the things we can agree on? What are the common goals that we both share? We may disagree about how to get there. We may not share all goals, but what are the goals that we can share? What can we affirm as our common ground? The truth is, we typically agree with the other person about far more things than we disagree. And so recognizing that our ground of agreement is larger than our ground of disagreement is a key first step to finding out how you can build a compromise between you. And that's the seventh point there. And that's be willing to give in order to get. In the episode, Michael Burnham is willing to give some information to Booker that he needs, and when Booker hears the information, he's willing to concede certain things to Burnham in order to get the peace that they both want. Right? Be willing to give in order to get is the key principle of compromise. Admittedly, and I don't know how this is going to turn out in the next episode because it hasn't aired yet. Admittedly, there is another piece to this puzzle in the episode. Tarka is there in the background, and he doesn't share common goals. How do we make peace with someone who doesn't share the same goals? Well, that's the topic for a different video. In any event, what is key here is that any kind of peacemaking requires, I believe, help from above. The truth is, God is on a mission to make peace. Peace between us and him, and also peace between us on earth. That's, I believe, why Jesus came into this world. That's what we celebrate at Christmas, is peace on earth, goodwill to men, on whom God's favor rests. Jesus came into this world to make peace between us and God. And I think that's something that's terrific and noble and wonderful. And because God is on a peacemaking mission, then God is willing to help us to make peace. Taking these steps, getting the log out of our own eye, that requires the help of God, I believe, to sort of examine your own soul. Admitting your part takes a courage that I often don't have on my own. Overlooking offenses and prioritizing peace over rights requires a trust that ultimately God's got my back. Forgiving one another's wrongs is, I think, a supernatural act. So I think these things require help from above. But maybe you don't come from the same tradition that I do. Maybe you believe that it can be done without sort of divine intervention. Either way, I think these principles are going to serve you well in any conflict you face. Again, if you're married, in your marriage, with your kids, these are great principles to deal with conflicts in your club, local club, at work. These are great principles. Get the log out of your own eye, admit your own part, overlook offenses, prioritize peace over your own rights, forgive other people's wrongs, look for common ground, and be willing to give in order to get. I think these are biblical principles. I think they're Star Trekian principles, and I hope that they help you to live long and prosper in peace and long life.